This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with sports lecturer and coach Stuart Wilkinson. He discusses his strategies in creating team cultures and how this ends in the group managing itself, his experience as a practitioner and how his practices have changed since the late 80s, as well as the importance of producing leaders within his context. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Perfect. So, Stuart, listen, really appreciate you jumping on. How are things in your world? Are you all good? World, are you all good? Sorry.
Yeah, good. We've just started pre-season training at Salford Red Devils. So we had a walking trial a couple of weeks ago. We're still fortunate to have maybe about 14 players from last season that's been kept on. And then the rest have moved on to other professional contracts into first team. So we were looking for any talent. So we had an open trial. From there, we've signed some junior internationals, so of a really good standard. So, I mean, it's they won't make an immediate impact because they are young, and they need a couple of years to develop further. But in terms of professional coaching, up and running again, and I've missed it. Even though I can't do much because of the state of my knee at the moment, that's always good. And then I've just gone back to work after a full knee replacement, so I've missed a big chunk of the start of the semester. So I'm just in the process of developing relationships and reacquainting myself with what I need to be able to do, and constantly be reminded that I'm forgetting things. My colleagues are calling me Rip Van Winkle at the moment because I've been off for that long. So yeah, it's just nice to be back around people again, talking about coaching and sport, and then delivering it of an evening while part-time role as a coach.
Perfect. So I think you've alluded to a couple of bits there in terms of what your roles are. Do you just want to explain to people, I guess, what it is you do, and I guess give an executive summary of how you've got there, if you like?
Yeah. So. Interesting one really, I suppose. If I give you a bit of a blast of my journey, and I was a professional player. For different reasons, I decided to move into coaching. I mean, when I was a professional player, it was always the coach would say, "Stuart, would you look after them? Stuart, can you do the warm up? Stuart, can you do this?" And so, toward the back end of my professional career, I was deeply engaged in coaching conversations and about player development and things like that. So. But what I really decided to do, I went to a local club and started right at the very bottom because I didn't know children or anything. So, I started with an under-12s community team and made a mess of it from there on in. And but it was a safe place to do and to learn about coaching. There was vocational coaches, but as we mentioned earlier, just before we opened up, there was no resources or information. In those days, there was one degree, which was a PE degree. And there wasn't many books written. The word pedagogy didn't exist. So, there was very limited resources back then when I first started coaching. But I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I knew I needed a team around me. So I knew a really good PE teacher and a couple of colleagues that were helping me. And before we were doing a good job and giving these kids a great experience. And from there on in, as I got qualified, I started to ambition got a grip, and I started to move through the pathways, and ended up working on a regional academy and then the national academies, national pathways, and from there I got an opportunity to work with Great Britain Academy at the time. So I think that was overnight, Michael. That was over a 4 or 5 year period where I started to develop my basic craft and my way of doing things that attracted a lot of interest from the coaching staff on the national pathways, games-based practices and things like that. I was brought up on drills and squares, and I hated it. And then the PE teacher, who was a good friend with, opened up a new world that there's a huge link between learning and fun. Best place to do that is games. So that was the way I went forward, and it certainly helped my career to become a fully professional coach. when I got on the coaching staff of Great Britain Academy, I was then headhunted by Leeds Rhinos, which is a huge Super League club, and I spent nearly 12 years with Leeds Rhinos, developing the youth system, and eventually helping coaching the first team. And from there, I was headhunted by Wigan Warriors, where I spent some time, and then I went to work for the national governing body, that was the Rugby Football League, and that's where I started to work internationally. Michael, I coached England schoolboys. And by that time, I'd already coached 15 years, so it wasn't an overnight success. And then I went on to coach England Academy myself. And then I coached the full Welsh national team in the European nations, and we won the European nations with Wales. And then I went back to England and Great Britain, the British Lions, the full British Lions, and as an assistant coach. And then my reputation grew. I started to work internationally, became an elite coach mentor for the French Federation. And then I eventually coach Russia in the World Cup, and I've just finished coaching the Serbian national team now at the moment. So, and then I'm back in professional sport again on a part-time basis with Salford Red Devils. But that journey wasn't linear, Michael. And I've been coaching since the late 80s, and so you can actually see nothing was overnight. And while I've met a lot of good people who've helped me, I've also met a lot of other people that didn't want me to be successful and sabotaged it for whatever reason. So, it's not an easy journey, and people do things in particular ways that inspires you to do even better. And in that time, of course, particularly when I was at Leeds, I did a degree at Leeds Carnegie, it was at the time. And then following that, I did a teaching degree, and then I've done a master's in coaching practice. And I've just finished my PhD in high performance leadership. So, the phrase walk the walk and talk the talk has been built up since the late 80s, when I first took my first level 1 coaching course, from under 12s to all that. And I suppose the different type of archetypes I've met on the way, the good and the bad guys, have all helped me in different ways.
I think what it will demonstrate for everyone listening is a really nice blend of, some practical examples or practical base of working, and what that looks like when you put it in front of children or full-grown adults and all that, but equally, up-to-date academic theory and whatnot as well. So I'm going to go for a very coach development type question to begin with, because it's one that you get quite a lot, which is, what is your philosophy of coaching? If someone said to you now, what do you believe in? What is that? And I guess the second question off the back of that is, has that changed from when you first started coaching in the late 80s?
Yeah, so regards to me coaching itself, not developing coaches, and I suppose it could be the same. It's developing self-determined, independent thinkers. Now that's full of tenets, and it could be a rabbit hole, Michael. Because it is, and do I live that? I'm pretty close to it at different times in my life. What it looked like early on, no, it was the A to Z of the sport, which is really just a job description. But we had to start somewhere. But I suppose I've never lost sight of, if you go back to if you like, what influenced that, it will be an interesting one for you, Michael. And a good place to start today is the past, as I've done before. So when I first started to play sport, there was no football association and there was no rugby association. Governance came from the church. Church owned sport in the 60s and 70s. So if you wanted to see sport or play sport outside school, you had to go to a youth club. Youth clubs were attached to the church. Okay, and that's where you played five-a-side, basketball, table tennis. You danced, you did everything at a local youth club. That's where I first saw judo, what these guys doing in white suits. And I wanted to be a professional footballer. But schools were really good in those days as well, because you had a full curriculum of sport. All right, you played, 12, 14 soccer matches a season, and then there'd be a rugby section as well. And, so schools did a good job of fixtures, because I don't think the Football Association, and I don't think junior mini rugby started till the late 70s, early 80s. And I was a professional by then. So going back to that, of course, those being a good person, and those real values, all right, and then the consistency when you're at your worst, be at your best, and when you're hardest hit, certainly influenced me as a player, and definitely me when I'm developing young people and young players. And I've got so many good stories where I've had to have a good moral compass and do the right thing by these young people, while at the same time probably fighting off some of the nasties and some of the haters and everything else that I want you to trip up as well. So having a good moral compass is a cornerstone of good youth coaching, and yes, it's certainly influenced how my biographical stance on my philosophy is established after all these years. And yeah, it's changed. Starting coaching in the late 80s when there wasn't much around, and to what it looks like today, there's been loads and loads of things that have allowed me to start to articulate that more accurately, and then display this in my behaviours, if you like, as a coach. And again, it just wasn't an overnight thing, Michael.
So I guess leaning on that, then you've mentioned around that philosophy, I guess, of being a good holistic person as well as a good player, whatever that looks like. How do you make that practical for players within your environment? Because I guess one easy thing is to see on a company wall, you go in and see it branded all over a wall or something like that. These are our values, but actually getting those to be lived and breathed by the people that are there is what's most important. Similarly, in a coaching situation, it's really easy to come in day one and say, well, this is what we're going to be, and then never revisit this again for a season and then do it again the following year. So for you, how have you gone around skillfully, I guess, embedding that into your practice? And have you got any examples of where you've done that really successfully or really poorly?
Like when you're working with young players and youth players, and like at the moment, a mixture of adults and senior players, they provide you with endless opportunities. Endless opportunities. There's no need to display it anywhere. They will give you from not, I looked over the other day when one of my assistant coaches were carrying the poles back to and in a bag full of cones, and he was overloaded going back to the container with the equipment. And I just stopped, and they were just having some malarkey before the floodlights went off. Stop everybody. All right. What the hell's going on here? Why is that happening? Don't come on this field unless you come off this field with something in your hand. All right. So while that's not, here's the badge. It's like tiny little baby steps all the time. Okay. And you just constantly around them. And then you quality assure that with punishment. Okay. So, one of my senior players has come up with an idea to roll the dice, and each time there's a mistake, you've got to roll the dice, and each number on the dice is a price to pay. But we don't build them to start with. They'll provide those with opportunities all the time. So there's not labels or badges anywhere, and we're really patient with our approach. And again, this links back to research. If you want it to be able to do that, if it's current with young people, it stays. So that means if it's an immediate intervention, Michael, all right, it stays. That becomes a regulation tool that they can attach to. Okay, so they'll just appear, and we just keep doing that. And so I don't do codes of conduct, and we don't do that anymore. The cultural architects will develop these ways themselves from their own slip-ups and messes that they do. And if not, I will booby trap it a little bit, and I will get some of the senior players to become cultural assassins and mess things up until they start to get regulated by the other groups. What did you do that for? We've got a punishment now. Turn the lights off. Behind you, shut the door. All right? Enter the field by one way. All the tiny things start to come along till it builds up to quite a good working environment for them. So, again, I don't do anything. I've got loads of stories I could tell you. I suppose the one that I shared yesterday, I was doing a workshop with the sports medicine masters, and I was doing multidisciplinary teams, and we're in tour with Great Britain Academy in New Zealand, and we'd sent the doctor and the conditioner out a year before to make sure everything, all the facilities and the hotel and where the training ground wing, what does the network look like and everything else, and do a lot of fact finding that it was quite accurate. Well, in Christchurch, the walk from the hotel to the training ground was literally 15 minutes, so it was handy. We didn't hire buses, which we thought was safe. But on the walk, all right, we had to walk through Canterbury's red light district. Okay, so, day one, we had a problem with 17-year-old young men. And this is where you need a good moral compass. And now all those young men are coaching now. I've coached them when they were kids. They went on to have great professional careers, being internationals. And now they're all engaged in coaching themselves. And believe it or not, we've reconnected. It's brilliant that they've come back for things like that. So, and they still gee me about that because, Michael, we moved hotels. I wasn't going to have it. So I didn't want to damage my reputation and their lives by them being too giddy around what Red District looked like, at that time. Just one of those things. So, every single man I've ever come across, what are you doing? All right, it's a good opportunity, Michael, and I've always seized them opportunities to show people and articulate, good behaviour and have a good moral compass. And that's just one of many. So I don't load anything. I just wait for it to happen and then seize it. And I suppose, that the IQ I've had as I've been around all that for such a long time, coaching, being a professional player, they stand out to me. Those little glitches stand out to me, so I can seize them quite away. Where normally maybe a young inexperienced coach who's not lived with the church running sport, it might have to be more of a deliberate approach to do that. And he'd probably need a good mentor to be able to help guide them and things like that. But with me, it was from my biographical journey. It taught me to grab those opportunities when they arise and make them significant for the young people I'm around.
I really like that cultural assassin that you mentioned, actually, and kind of, if they're not coming up naturally, maybe planting it so it does give you an opportunity to address it. It's a small tactic, but could hold value for sure.
I mean, what I did last year was I had an amazing result, really. So we went on a pre-season camp. Everybody has to take a pocket toy. All right, so I had a little Super Bowl. You could bounce and stuff like that. And some people bought silly size stuff that they couldn't carry everywhere with them because you needed to be able to carry it everywhere with you. That was one of the points. Okay. Now, if you didn't have that toy on you at any point I asked, all right, there was a price to pay. All right, so we're in Wales and it was in the winter and it was a dip in the sea and a kid running the sea. Okay. Again, there was consequences for you not looking after this ball. But in each dormitory, I planted an assassin. Okay. So if any toy was left out, he'd nab it and give it to me. Okay. So straight away, it was like, there's some effing sod stealing stuff here. Where's my toy at? Trying to go in berserk, trying to find it. And then they started to regulate you. Where's your toy? Where's your job? Turn the light off. Do this, do that. So just a little tiny thing like that, I could tell you so many horrible stories that what it created amongst the group. Do you understand what I mean? So tiny things like that, little tools like that. Of course, nobody wants to go in a cold sea with no clothes on. So yeah, they used to, and then they started to look after each other's toy. They pick some, if there's a toy left, they'd pick it up and give it back to each other. Then that became a sock, it became a kit, it became an equipment, it became a door, it became the lights, it became rubbish. All right, it became how you entered the training area and left it tidy. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just escalated from there and worked a treat. So we go again in January somewhere else, and I've got another trick for them. A friendly way of starting to develop those interactions amongst the group where they start to regulate each other's behaviour. I've got a big repertoire of them, Michael, because as much as I have about the drills and games that I play, so I have been doing it a long time. Perhaps writing a book one day might help everybody.
Yeah, I just think it's a really nice way, instead of easing it in, and actually, rather than being, here are your jobs, I'm going to be the one that manages it. It's actually, okay, we're going to start with something really small and really simple, and that will be our end goal, is that actually when we give you a task or whatever that may be for making sure we've got match kit, you're not going to forget it because you understand the importance of the little details and what that adds up to. So I just think it's a really nice, almost, as you said, gamified way of teaching them the importance of it.
And Michael, it works. I've got your back. You've got mine. Do you know what I mean? Because if I hadn't and you knew and someone took something of mine to mess the group up and they had a price to pay, you're letting me down. So, it's I've got your back, you've got mine. Isn't that a team?
Yeah. And have you seen that translate to more, I guess, visible / vocal leaders? Because I'd imagine if by holding each other account, I think one thing that gets highlighted more in modern society is people saying there's no leaders anymore. We don't see anyone on the pitch. My argument would be, I think it's just different, the way leadership is manifested now to what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. But do you see that become more visual, more vocal with those groups that you do this type of work with?
Yeah, so I get those architects start to flourish and thrive and want to contribute. They naturally emerge. There's some things they might, because of the disposition and the personalities, they might not always jump out and take control without a nudge. And then once it's been done, they know that's their job as well. But generally, straight from the camp, they start to flourish and thrive and look for ways to contribute to other people's experiences. Quite often, I'll stop them at different points and I'll say, Michael, who influenced your session the most today? Which one of your peers influenced your session? And if so, what did they contribute? What did they adjust that's left you with some, really good fond memories of this session today? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? And and then they'll say, yeah, well, Henry helped me with this. I was confused a little bit, and because of the game and the intensity and the speed of everything, I never had a chance to ask a question. And he saw I was struggling, and he just grabbed me. And then I turned to Henry and say, isn't that wonderful that someone's going home in the car thinking about you like that? So it's celebrated as well that, and you nurture that within them as well. It doesn't have to be a deliberate thing. And then when it gets ugly and messy, and you've got your darker skilled athletes that come from that have a bit of darkness in them, that they'll rise up when it gets ugly and messy and do a job. And to be fair, but they don't often need a nudge. All right, they'll fix them up themselves if there's something that shouldn't be done. So there, two of my players. And I know he won't mind me saying it because I've told his mum how proud I have him. A young man called Lewis Hall last year. He's now moved to Australia. Full of surprises. A new player came in and he hadn't been on their journey pre-season. It was still quite early on in the season. And he had a good reputation. He was from a big club. And they had a fisticuffs in training. Okay. During a conditioning session. They fell out with each other and blows were exchanged. So, straight away, everybody carry on. And then when they got out of breath, they stopped and then jumped back in the session and finished it off. And I hope I don't put anybody off rugby league, but it happens. And the best way to do it is with humour, which I had loaded up afterwards anyway. But Lewis, I was really thought, this isn't right, because it's because of the type of person he is. And so the new guy come up to me and he was really, really upset and apologised, and it should never happen. I said, don't worry about it. See you at the next session. Off you go. And spoke to Lewis and just went, well, what was all that about then? She said, Stuart, he's cutting corners and won't having it. Everybody knows he's cutting corners and won't having it. So I told him, all right, we don't do that here. And then he was embarrassed about me telling him in front of everybody and pushed me. So I belted him. All right, we don't do that here. So I rang the young man the following day and I said, listen, I've got, and he verified it with some of the other lads did it, and he said, it wasn't on his own that saying you're cutting corners, and the kid put the phone down on me and never come back. Am I bothered? Not one bit. So, and Lewis is a rough house and he won't stand any nonsense, and he never did, and he'd always sort out anybody who was tasty in the other team. I don't have to instruct them to target him. People like Lewis do it themselves because the environment, they're allowed to mess up. I told his mum and dad about it, and they were so proud they had that integrity that we were missing it during training, and he regulated it himself. It didn't go well, and it's not good to do that, but I've not a problem with it because he defended some of our values without anybody prompting him, and he never. And it's still the same now when he plays.
And that was what was going to be my next point. Is actually, as a coach, that's kind of the gold standard in terms of the players managing the values of the group themselves and holding each other to account. So whilst you said, yeah, the way you did it may not be the way, actually what you've done is challenge someone who's new, who might be, we think, adds value in a playing capacity. But it's like, actually, if you're not going to fit into the culture we've created, that's more important to us than what you can bring, and making that a focus, which I think is a real positive.
I'm sure people can have an argument against it, but I'm not bothered. There's no badges on the wall, and it was pretty easy to do, and our model works because a young man was prepared to defend it with physicality if needed be. Tried dialogue and arbitration to start with, but it wasn't working. That's the way it turned out. So I think that's a win for us and what we were trying to be able to achieve.
And how do you get that to mirror across multiple age groups? And not so much first team, because I appreciate, obviously, you can mirror that goes down. But if you're working with maybe 14s, 15s, 16s, 18s, how do you ensure that pathway, I guess, is carried across all of those age groups? So we linking back to what
you couldn't take that down below without moderation. They need this, that level of knowledge framework and intellect building over a period of time. So you can't take that and drop it on an under 12s team. Certainly not. Definitely not on under 14s team. And when they get to post maturation and relate, and they understand the friends group of a variety of people in front of them, and there's some neurodiversity there, and they're not able to they haven't built up enough emotional intelligence to really understand what stood in front of them. So what it looks like probably under 12s is just collaboration and ensuring that they're collaborating and ensuring they can have a sensible debate without falling out, and then look for reason. And might even follow up with some research, which is just asking you a question, Michael. Can you clarify this? Have I got this wrong? So you've got to encourage that them interactions, and your games should encourage those interactions between each other, and the problems you set within the games encourage collaboration. So they start to build up that EQ over a period of time, and then again, some of them can't engage because of the neurodiversity, with barriers. So you couldn't drop that model any further down, but it does prepare them for what's waiting on the corner for them when they become full-time professionals or semi-professionals, wherever they've moved to. That you don't cut corners, and if you do, I'm going to do something about it. Right?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting what you can do to put foundations in that allow you to do it. So if it is, like you there, just having a healthy debate, actually, can we encourage that within our under 12s where they're willing to challenge one another, but understand that it maintains respect, and that actually we're ultimately doing it because we want what's best for the group. If that's what it looks like for an under 12, then that's what you can drip feed into a session.
They won't have a heated debate, and perhaps the most confident kid in the under 12s will dominate the shy, disengaged kids. But as soon as you start, you won't know that until you start to hit them with problem after problem. And it's just like, right, there's the field, guys. You've got to get that ball from there to 10 metres off that try line, and they're going to stop you. Go and have a chat on how you're going to do it. All right, you've only got 5 tackles and a kick to do it. And then you just listen in. All right, and then let them mess up. Okay, and then when they master it, you do something with the defensive team. So you constrain it. So they've got to start finding new emergent skills. So they've got to reflect on it again. And then by that time, you've got a bit of an idea then who are who likes that game, who can contribute most to it in terms of strategies and collaboration. They're all playing a part. And then you say, right, okay, now I'm going to give that challenge to this shy, disengaged young person that needs to start to be able to contribute to a group. And again, you just like the fuse. But again, you got to have that more good moral compass, and you've got to when you're watching them develop those interactive skills and the communication skills and the leadership skills, that you're careful that there's nothing sinister or deviant taking place, because they do have them, kids have them, and you've just got to make sure you keep an eye on that.
Perfect. So I think linking back to what you said then, how does that change when you come from like an academy environment with younger players to then when you're in obviously a men's environment, a man environment in those first teams? And did that change you much as a practitioner, kind of going from those development environments into that first team space?
I mean, the adults are already developed, aren't they? And if someone's done a good job of them, you're going to inherit some good blokes, aren't you? But elite sport and professional sport's all about task. Is it going to contribute to the performance which they're after? They are all about winning. It is about that. While you take a lot of pressure off them during training, okay, in terms of putting all the building blocks in place that are going to be able to do that well. Okay, so, at a micro level, say whatever you're working on, you might cover 4 or 5 things in a session, weight, physical recovery, and everything else you need to be able to do. The challenges within that can still look the same. Okay, there's a task. You need to be able to maneuver them. What did you see? And again, how it works is that you've got internationals that you're dealing with as well, aren't you? More to the teams that have coached. So we show them the framework. We've got the big picture. This is how they've been outmaneuvered. This is where they're vulnerable. And then on Thursday, we get the detail from them. So we have working groups. And again, within that group as well, there might be 4 or 5 pods where they've researched themselves, and they'll come up with some micro skills and some micro things where they think they could actually catch them out or outmaneuver them when they've got the ball. And then we build that in as well. So, we have to know it ourselves, but they do. We've got people like Brodie Croft, who we have at Salford in the team, who's been in some great places. So he's like your Lionel Messi, if you like. You're not going to ignore him. He comes up with some very valuable stuff. And that's all added into what the final sessions and preparations can look like. So co-creation, collaboration, teamwork, does it represent the main way how we're going to be able to produce stuff? And we're being honest, we're not taking any shortcuts. And they do that themselves by then as well. So there's no, everybody, there's an acceptance of how everybody is, and their culture is everything, and how they conduct themselves with lateness or any shortcuts that are done or any mishaps that have taken place. They do all that themselves, and that's already in place. While it's a very, very stressful job, you're constantly under pressure. Some of the principles are still the same, Michael. Okay, particularly the stuff that, on the grass that we love doing, in terms of providing problems and games for them to solve by using some of our processes. So more process than magic, really. So that's not really any different. It's just developed and done properly. And if they're not right, they tell you. You know what I mean? You're hurting us. We're not doing it. You can't. Everybody thinks, "Oh, let's get on the piss." No, I want to go and pick my kids up from school. I love the school run. Do you know what I mean? They do. That's what they're like. It's got to be. If it's what we're doing this for, why are we doing it? Is it going to be benefit to us? So they will question it, because there's their life away from what we're doing is important as well. That needs to flourish as well.
And have you had any particular examples where individuals have challenged the collective culture of the group that you've had to step in, or where the group is saying he's being late or whatever that looks like, but performances on a performance basis, they're high performing, which then creates a challenge of, do I reprimand a high performer, which might then, fix the culture, but not the performance? Have you had any particular examples of that?
Yeah, it happens all the time. One club, they made a major signing, and after a bit of time, and this has happened a few times in different ways, the players came to the coaching staff and just said, he's not for us, get him out. Well, why? Well, have you done this? Yeah, we've done that. Won't respond. Have you done that? We've hit him with that. Won't respond. It's not one of us. And his form's good. All right, but no, it's not. It's gonna end bad. Don't get rid of him now. And that happened. He went off somewhere else. It was really, really and the coach told him to, we're not letting you go. The lads don't want you. You got to remember, this club had won a lot of trophies in a short period of time, and it really, really hurt him, but fixed him. And he went on to have a great career and was a good international. Played in a couple of World Cups. Really good. But that was a really, really big turning point in his life. Being rejected by his peers.
I think that's a nice, almost nice end to say the fact that actually you provided the rationale to why as well. So it'd be very, very easy just to push him out the door and say, thanks for coming, see you later. But actually to say, listen, just so you're aware on your next step, this is what the feedback we had was, and this is part of the reason why we've made this decision. And it must be powerful for him as a player to receive that. Must be powerful.
And the lads that did it are now out there as being absolutely wonderful people. They're in the press all the time for running lots of marathons. Just incredible bunch of men that what they couldn't take to him because he had his microcultures weren't aligned, and poor research was done on him. So when they do sign somebody at that level, Michael, the research is really intense. Does he match what we're doing? And like Roy Keane at Man United, who was a cultural architect, he soon became a cultural assassin and had to go. And sometimes you have to do that when the environment changes because of age, injury profile, and another part of that person starts to influence the environment and the culture in a wrong way. So, at that level, it's magnified. There's nothing can sneak through under the radar, Michael. It's that tight, and the lads want it that tight as well. So as soon as it's a glitch, it just stands out.
And do you think that's why those teams that tend to have success tend to have a spine that are there for a period, because actually they're the ones that are able to define the culture of what they want it to be, and people that come into it, the old acronym is fit in or type of deal, where actually we've been successful, we know this works, either buy into it or you're not for us, and that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, the best example is the book Legacy. It was a catastrophe. That was a long task. It took 12 years of catastrophe with the All Blacks. And then a consortium of really, really ex-All Black top coaches got together and said, right, let's sort this out once and for all. Historically, let's buckle that. What did we do? Now, that's what it takes. Okay. And while they might not have that immense success that they had internationally, okay, in terms of winning stuff, which is all about the international level, particularly what they do, they are world champions of culture. And I think that brand for New Zealand and the All Blacks, it's, how can I put it, probably the best trophy they've ever won. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yes, everything else has speeded up. Argentina are great now. Italy are knocking off teams. So, perhaps they never ever get back to that dominance that they had, Michael. But I don't think anybody can ever touch them in terms of, being the world champions of culture.
And I think, like you said there, which is really interesting, it almost amplifies then to what does your grassroots team do? Because if we know that that's our end goal, and you're saying to me at 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 years old, you want to be an All Black, there's kind of some level of non-negotiables of how you conduct yourself, if that's what you want your goal to be. Now, again, what it looks like at 10 is very different, and the mind is going to change that, but the humility of being a decent person, that doesn't change.
And you can influence that in the games you design, the collaboration, the tasks you set them. You know what I mean? You're not looking for, that steely archetype that plays in that All Black senior shirt. You're looking at someone who can, get somebody's back, support them with an idea, show some enthusiasm and commitment. All right, come up with an intelligent response. You can cultivate all that within the games that you design right down at that junior level. All right, you can start to sow the seeds that it's not me, it's we. And I'm with you on this. And the games that we design, and the problems that they've got to be able to solve, that's what takes place at 10. It's the same principles, but it just looks much softer and friendlier for all those different levels. Sorry, that's my wife ringing me, gentlemen.
No worries.
Yeah.
Do you want me to pause it quick?
No, it's fine. I'll call her back when we've finished.
Cool. Yeah, well, I was going to ask one last question, then we'll be done anyway.
Yeah, so. No problem.
So, I guess last question for me, and we haven't touched on any real coaching stuff, so we'll have to do another one again of these later down the line, because there'll be loads of design type stuff that you'll be able to touch upon. But who's the most impressive individual you've worked with in this kind of, I guess it's leadership, cultural architect type space, and why?
Well, there's just so many. They all bring different things to different environments, and because the environments are so complex and nuanced, Michael. All right, that helps mold and shape how they are as people. And before you know it, they're a product of that environment, and they've developed these characteristics, and now they've left a legacy. Every club I've ever been at has had them, or a number of them, that have taken place. So, if the environment's right, that's created by, the hierarchy of the club, the coaches, and everything else, and the talent development pathways that they come through, these people will embed a lot of the things that you want from a leader, and then become leading characters within the organisation. And then the end of the process, they've actually, left a legacy of a certain type of behaviours that for others to pick up and shape and mould themselves upon. So I'd love to name one, but every single one of them has a difficult challenge. In fact, if I did, I'm going to do it. Sean O'Loughlin, during the time at Wigan, I think he's coaching there now. He was the coach. He was the captain of Wigan when it wasn't a good team, when it was fighting off relegation. All right. Now, was he shaped and moulded by his predecessors? Absolutely. So, even though he later on in his career, when things picked up, he picked up some trophies. I was really pleased for Sean, because he did it when he was messy and ugly and there was backs to the wall, and brilliant.
Perfect. Listen, Stuart, really appreciate your time. As I said then, we'll definitely catch up again for another one of these, but appreciate your time and catch up with you again soon.
All right. No problem, Michael. Thanks for everything.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.